Okay, here we're working with George Baldwin. Mr. Baldwin is about a 16 index, currently more of a 1 to 2 times a month golfer, and has been as low as about a 10 handicap in the past. Has a background just playing a lot of sports, a lot of athletics, and you can kind of see in his motion he's got a ton of really good hand-eye coordination. He's able to really hit some really decent shots despite some kind of issues going on in his motion. And we talked about just his goals, what he's looking for this season and kind of going forward. And really he just wants to eliminate some dumb mistakes. He wants to stop making, silly mistakes. He fights a bit of a snap hook. That's really his biggest weakness. So he'd like to see that ball not go straight left of left when he does make a miss hit. And so we talked a lot about, just understanding what it is that makes the ball go left, why does it go left, and what we can do to help combat that in the long term. So the first thing you look at here on the right, when you actually see the club takeaway, you notice the grip is a little unique. It doesn't put a lot of pressure there in his right hand, right? So if we zoom in right there. And that's partly to do with from a sporting injury in his right pinky, where he's unable to really put his full hand on the club. So because of that, he's learned to kind of compensate for it, and so the swing is predominantly in his left hand, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you can kind of see where a little bit of a release issue happens. So we did talk about weakening that grip a little bit, get that left hand a little bit more to the left, and in turn that right hand should get a little bit more on the golf club, just enough where it's not painful, but it's in a little bit of a better position. Because starting with a setup right here, a little bit close to the ball, you can see there's not really much of a gap right here. So we did talk about getting it just slightly away from it, just a little. But the biggest thing on the backswing is this position right about here. Okay, so if we take a look at this position with a different color, relative to his arm position, right, that's a shut club face. Okay, so that closed position immediately is setting him up to hit to the left. As we continue up to the top, no real pivot, more just a rolling of the hands, so that club gets very past parallel, hit a bit across his body. He does manage, though, to make it more parallel to the starting position, which is pretty good. But at the point where he would have liked it to stop, you can see it's still a little bit on the closed side. So definitely some issues there, just from a club face position, but that's mainly from the body not really giving any sort of a pivot, not getting that club in an attempt to get it up a little bit more on plane, which in turn would help him with that position, because getting a little bit across at the top then leads to him on the downswing steepening that shaft severely. You can see right here, that's not what we will call lag. That is the extra steepening of the shaft. As you can see, it's already relative to both of his red lines here, it's more vertical. Okay, so that tells us right there that shaft is getting very steep, and then now he's starting to try to bring it in a little bit more shallow, which he does a decent job of. But in order to get that club from that such a steep position to shallow, he's now had to really exercise his hand positions and change his motion with his hands in order to save it. So you can see he gets down to impact pretty nicely, but no real pivot of the body position. You can see that right foot still kind of on the ground. Doesn't fully unwind, and instead you can see those hands are really starting to unwind. So if we eliminate both these, there's the face at impact, there's a through impact, there's an after again, and eventually there. So you can just see from all those green lines just how much that club face is rotating through impact. So it's just a lot of excess hand motion through impact, right? And it's just all cause and effect, which is something that he and I talked a lot about, is that if we can get that club a little bit more open here, right? So yellow line's the bad. Instead of there, if we can feel that club maybe a little bit more this way, right? That'd be a little bit more in line with his arm position. And then up to the top, trying to create a little bit more of a pivot. So instead of that club working this way, try to have it work a little bit more up in here, okay? Because that'll just improve his playing position, so then he can come right back down to impact and won't have to use his face as much. Now, if we move over to the left one, over on the left side here, In addition to that setup being a little bit close, just not a fan of this position right here, because that is also one of the biggest culprits in getting a closed club face, is having actually a slightly hands forward position. So if we can get his hands a little bit more neutral or straight on, let's get a better line there, a little more this way in the setup, that will help that club face open up a little bit. Because here, because it's so forward pressed already, the tendency is to kind of hinge early, which closes that club face. And then you can see here, no real pivot in that lower body. We'd love to see those hips just get a little bit more this way, just to help create a little bit of a deeper turn. So that way that club at the top, go back to the right one, is over here. Okay. And then here on the downswing, you can probably see a little bit more. There's that real steepening of the shaft right there. So that position is this position, right about there. So then he has to kind of dip that right shoulder behind the golf ball a lot. Now you can see that club face and the shaft are starting to release a little early. There's impact, does a decent job of squaring it when the timing's right, but you can see just where his body position is. He's more tilted way back here, when in a perfect world we'd like to be tilted more this way. In turn, has to kind of keep the hands guiding out. There's almost what we would call a little bit of a chicken wing, and as a result the club face just rotates a little bit too excessively.